If there is one thing that the education system has demonstrated to society, it's that just because you receive a degree does not necessarily mean you've attained or earned any wisdom. And I think this is one of the main reasons that we're so screwed as a society. It's like it's crazy because I'm experiencing polarities of the society almost instantaneously all the time. I'll see some really good acts of service or acts of kindness or acts of just righteousness or goodness in general that is actually righteous, that is actually good. And even with all the people that I'm communicating here on YouTube and behind the scenes and behind the screen, it's like whenever we're talking, we're building things, we're on the right track, we're getting to a place that is less terrible than where we are now. And that's always a good thing because life is a harsh place. And like Mike Tyson said, mankind was not put here to be humble. Mankind was, and I might be paraphrasing here, but mankind was placed to be humbled. So it's not necessarily about being humble, it's about being humbled. And there are so many people out here that think that because they have a degree or because they have a certain career or because they have a certain job, this makes them the hot shit of the day. And they'll just start to treat you differently and treat you like with such pride and with such arrogance that you're just like you're a respectful human being. Like you look people in the eye when you talk to them. You say, "Excuse me, please, and thank you." Everybody should learn those three sayings in the English language, by the way. It makes you a 10 times more sophisticated person. And it's not necessarily about sophistication. It's more about, especially as men, we need to be... Golly, I'm so sick of seeing men with pink hair and like septum piercings. It's like, and then their fingernails are painted too. It's bizarre to me. It's effeminate. That's really what it is. It's effeminate. And the more masculine that I am in my groundedness, it's like the more repulsed I am by men that are effeminate. But we men, we really need to be the badasses that can get stuff done, and we need to be capable of savagery, but yet sophisticated enough to which we can communicate and understand the value of wisdom. This is what so many people are missing nowadays, is the value and the true appreciation of wisdom. Now, there are a few things that I want to highlight, and I might just put this as the title here. Let's see, so it's education, true education that is, intelligence, wisdom, spirituality, being built physically, integrity, and love. These are the pillars that are going to be able to be stood upon with soundness of mind when it comes to pursuing righteousness. Because all in all, a man is nothing without love. And actually in the Bible it does say something along those lines. But speaking of the Bible, I do have a few verses that I want to talk about. And this is the Romans 8, 5 through 8. And it says, "For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they are after the Spirit. They are the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then, they that are in the flesh cannot please God. So what exactly does that mean? Enmity. Enmity. Enmity is basically a hostility or a certain kind of aggression toward a thing or a person. So God basically doesn't like it when we are carnally minded. Well, so what exactly does it mean to be carnally minded then? Well, carnally minded is exactly like that, thinking of the flesh. So this is lustful thoughts. This is basically everything that is the opposite of education, intelligence, spirituality, being built physically, integrity, and love. You can think about it as the complete flip of the 7 deadly sins in some sense. I actually don't know if there were 7 things that I listed there, but that just came to mind as if you just flipped the 7 deadly sins. What is the opposite of each? That would be more of a virtue, or that would be more of a pillar in which we can strive toward. So, something that I've been asking myself recently is if love is meaningless, and is love meaningful? Is it one or the other? Because there's a quote by a sage named Osho, and he said that love is of the heart, but the mind makes something meaningful. And I thought a lot about this because it didn't really make sense to me, but it did. I knew it made sense, but I didn't know why it made sense exactly. And I thought about how one of the commandments, or like actually the very first commandment that Jesus says to us, is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all our mind, and all of our soul. So that just goes to show that the mind itself can be considered as consciousness to some degree. But with the heart, like that's the body, and then the soul is the eternality of our being, of our spirit. And there's a song that's called Now and Then by the Beatles, and it just came out in November last year now, because it's January. And the song was actually originally a demo, but Paul and Ringo were working on it, and they ended up making it into a beautiful song. If anybody hasn't listened to it, I definitely recommend listening to it. It's a beautiful song, and John's voice was on it. So John Lennon, who was assassinated years ago, his voice still was there on this demo. And this just goes to show the power of the spirit and the power of the soul. John Lennon's body is not even here. Well, it is, but it's in the ground, rest his soul. But it isn't. It's here, but he his soul still lives on, even though his consciousness is not here anymore. So in a way, it's when you are actually participating in an act of creation, which is essentially what men are supposed to do. We are supposed to create. We are supposed to build. And this is what so many fundamentally lack in our society. We don't know what it's like to build. We don't know what it's like to create. You can create with just your words. I don't know if you knew that, or if you've ever been told that, but you can create reality in some degree with your words and your thoughts. How? Well, because your mind is more of a tool than the body could ever be. It takes the mind. Well, you need the mind in order to have the body, but you also need the body in order to have the mind. But it's also in a sense that you need to pursue righteousness for the sake of spirituality and for the sake of redeeming your soul, if anyone can do such a thing. Redeeming the soul is very difficult because many of us has sinned a lot. And many of us that are in the truth now have had an array of of sins in the past. Not all of us, but there's a lot of us that do have that kind of background. But the best way to do this and to not be sent to hell is to confess to God and to yourself of what you're actually doing and what you're planning to do to change that, and then act out that behavior in which you're planning to change. The acting out the behavior in which you want to change is the most difficult part, but that's where God is going to reward you the most. And this is exactly why God has enmity for people that are in the flesh, that are not wanting to repent, that are still willfully sinning. I mean, some of these people just aren't gonna get it. They're just not. It's like I'm sure everybody's heard the saying, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's what it's going to be like for a lot of these people out here, man. Like, a lot of these people out here, it's really sad, but they're not going to be able to learn the lessons of life. They're just not. And it takes a real man, a genuine man that is authentic, that is fully in himself, to be able to teach lessons for both males and females. Haven't you ever seen that it's the males that can teach both women and men that are often the most patient? They don't need to be patient, but they are the most patient. They're the most capable of aggression, but they're also the most humble in some sense as well. They're the most meek, you could say. They have this capacity for force, but they don't necessarily use it in a violent way. They use it in a constructive way. And that's exactly what I'm aiming to do, because most people are chaotic as they are just so insensitive to reality, and they're just stuck in their delusion, so much so that trying to communicate with them is actually more work for you, just to try to get into the communication process. It's so much work because they don't have nothing, they don't have anything to give. They have nothing. They have nothing to give you. Why? Because they're stuck in the flesh. The reason that I mentioned John Lennon and the song with the Beatles is because this just goes to show that if your work is pleasing to the Most High, and I'm not necessarily saying that John Lennon was godly or anything like that. I don't know him. I didn't know him, but I know a lot about him, and I know a lot about the Beatles, and I don't think any of them would be. I think they have their fair share, and I think they know about the truth, but I don't think any of them have claimed to follow Jesus per se. But I do know that their music brings out a certain kind of positive emotion that most don't. And this is what's so cool about music. And because what exactly is happening is the neurons in your brain are responding to a frequency, evoking a certain kind of emotion or stimulus in the rest of your body. So this is a biological process that we must not take for granted, and that we must accept as a reality. So anyway, the point is that John Lennon is not here physically, but he is here spiritually. Spiritually, he's still here. I mean, he was shot, 40 years ago? And now Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr were able to continue the work that was already in the demo to make something better. And this is sometimes what's going to happen in life is sometimes you're going to start certain things, and you might get a few years down the road before you come back to it, or you might just take a couple days or a week or 2 weeks or whatever the case may be. But you come back to it. because you're committed and you're dedicated and you want to continue the consistency process. This is something that takes tremendous work. This is something that takes tremendous courage in some sense, but it also has everything to do with valuing wisdom. If we do not value wisdom, we're not going to be educated properly. We're not going to be taught properly. We're not going to listen properly. We're not going to be able to expand and articulate our thoughts or emotions in a sophisticated manner in which we can genuinely be who we are and accept the reality and live with it on the terms in which reality provides. But this all comes back also to those pillars, which is, once more, being educated properly, having integrity, being intelligent, valuing wisdom, being spiritual, and also having integrity with love, you could say. Because love is not necessarily something that you can have without meaning. But how do I say this? Meaningfulness is not possible without love, but love is possible without meaning. People can love things. You can love your sin. You can love not to repent. That doesn't make it right. And this is exactly what Osho was trying to say. This is exactly what Osho, the sage, was trying to get across. Was it's not until you implement the divinity of the logos, the mind, in which you create meaning for the entire existence that is your body, that is your mind, that is your soul. And this also, to cap off, sums up what Jesus says when he says, worship God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. So I hope this message was useful and insightful to some degree. I know it was a bit of an open-ended teaching, I suppose, and an edifying process. It was more of a taking several different points that didn't really seem to connect, or that could have connected, but then tying it all together at the end and trying to take as many forms of truth as possible and conglomerating it together to make this kind of this unique dish of truth. So thank you for bearing with me and listening and all your support. I really do appreciate it, and peace be with you. Till next time.